Well, our electricity rates have finally changed. We are now paying more for electricity than we did in the past. Or are we actually? So we're going to dive in and we're going to see what changed with our electricity rates and how much our electricity bill has gone up or possibly even down, because I'm not only a solar customer, but also home battery storage as well. Let's dive in and take a look at the numbers. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tech Motoring. So today we're going to be discussing the changes that have recently occurred to our electricity bill from our electricity company, obviously. And now, if you're following the channel, we have done plenty of things in the past up to this point when our electricity company started announcing that there were going to be changes to our electricity rate structure, that they were going to be changing the way that we were going to get billed. Now, assumingly, you were just going to be paying more per kilowatt hour. That's usually how that works. It's just we're going to start charging you more per kilowatt hour, and then that will usually try to balance their books a little bit better. However, they did something a little different than what I was expecting, and they implemented what they call a demand charge. Now, if you don't know what a demand charge is, I'll go into it a little bit on this episode, and I might actually do a more dedicated episode to exactly how demand charges work and some other possible on-peak, off-peak structure that you might come across on your electricity bill. So let's take a look and first dive back into what we talked about a while ago. So previously, you'll know that we have Santee Cooper as our electricity company here in South Carolina, or this part of South Carolina, I should say. And we have been paying for the past, I don't know how many years, I think since 2017, 10 cents per kilowatt hour off-peak, which is the off-peak months, which is about 8 months out of the year. And then the other 4 months, which was on-peak, we paid about 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which those months usually I think were June, July, August, September. So we paid an extra 2 cents per kilowatt hour for those on-peak months. Now, there was no on-peak, off-peak time during the day, or there was no other time of use charges. It was simply just 10 cents all day long, all month long for the off-peak months. And of course, the 12 cents per kilowatt hour for on-peak. Santee Cooper had last year started to show that they were going to change the rate structure in 2025. And they were going to bring in not necessarily on-peak, off-peak hours, well, technically it is, but the on-peak hours, which would be considered 3 hours a day, depending on the season, would be on-peak, but they would be charging you a demand fee. Now, let's jump into what a demand fee is real quick so you kind of understand what that is. So a demand fee is not the amount of kilowatt hours or the amount of energy you use over that course of time, but it is the peak amount of load that you pull from the grid during those 3 hours. And then they charge you a multiplication of dollar amount based on that load. So let's say, for instance, you happen to be charging your electric vehicle during this peak time. And let's say that your total household pulls a load of 10 kilowatt during that time of peak. Well, you would be charged 10 kilowatt times whatever the dollar demand charge is. So in our case, our dollar demand charge is 8. So we pay $8 per kilowatt of demand charge. So that means that that 10 kilowatt multiplied by 8 would be an $80 demand charge for the month. So that's crazy when you think about it, because that could be almost the same cost as you pay for electricity. Is now you're just doubling it with a single demand charge. So they basically said, don't use any of your big appliances and don't do anything that pulls a lot of load during those 3 hours per day. Now, if you want to know what those 3 hours per day are, it's 6 to 9 a.m. during the winter time, and during the on-peak, which is usually the summertime, it is 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. So basically, in this winter time, it's the time you get up to take a shower and get ready for work. And in the summertime, it's basically the time that you get home and start cooking dinner. So basically, you don't win at this whatsoever because you're probably always going to pay some sort of demand charge, especially since your house just idling alone is going to pull something from the grid. Now, let's dive into how I combat this. Now, about 5 years ago, we actually put solar on our roof. Now, of course, this is back before I even knew about these changes coming to Santee Cooper and their electricity rates, but I did it just purely out of this has got to eventually go up and it's got to eventually get worse. So what can I do to try to combat that? So I ended up putting solar on our house about 5 years ago, which has been a great investment, in my opinion, for our cost of electricity here and also giving us some independence from the grid. Now, of course, this doesn't give you full independence from the grid because basically if the grid goes down, your solar doesn't work either, or at least not with our particular setup. So that doesn't really help all that much. In order for you to be more independent from the grid, you also would need battery storage, which in our case, we just as of 2 years ago put in 2 Tesla Powerwalls for battery storage, which has been really awesome because every time that there is a power outage in the area, our house stays lit. Every time we need to offset really expensive demand charges, our battery does the work for us. And so we are now basically independent from the grid, but at the same time, we rely on the grid for those times where we don't have a lot of solar or we just overuse what our battery capacity is and we need a little bit extra of a boost. And so even though our reliance on the grid is minimal now, we still need to be connected to it. Not unless I doubled our batteries and doubled our solar and really, really wanted to go for it and completely go off grid. But honestly, that's not exactly easy to do nowadays. So let's go ahead and dive in. Without further ado, let's dive into our electricity bill for not only last April, which I want to show you, and how things changed, but also this April as well to see how the electricity worked out for us. So I'm showing you literally a picture of our bill. Of course, I've redacted some of our personal information from it. But as you could see here from last year, you can see this is from April 3rd to May 2nd of 2024. We used a total of 227 kilowatt hours from the grid. That's not including our solar or anything else. And we had a demand on peak of 3.5 kilowatt. Now, at the time, they were basically telling us we're going to be possibly doing a on-peak demand charge. We want to give you some insight into what that will look like. And so they started putting it on the bill even though they weren't charging for it, which I honestly think was a really good thing to do. It's like just show people what they're already doing. And I think Santee Cooper, on an overall sense, did a pretty good job of giving everybody heads up that this was happening. Of course, whether or not they understood what that meant, demand charges are not something you hear very often. So that's why I think there might be some confusion. You could see that we had a customer charge of $19.50. Now, everybody gets charged this customer charge. You can't get out of it. If you're connected to the grid, you get charged $19.50 per month. There's no way out of that. That's just the way it is. You can see under that we have an energy charge of $22.63. So that would be the 227 kilowatt hours multiplied by the rate of electricity, which at that time should have been 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Now you're probably wondering why that number doesn't quite match up. Well, that's why we need to move down to the bottom. So if you look under this renewable energy area, you can see where we have energy credits, kilowatt hours received, and you can see we got $1.84. So that means we sent back actually $1.84 worth of electricity to them, not to us. They actually give you less money back for electricity than what you take from them. So we sent back $1.84. We got a $1.84 credit for them, and then we get charged a solar metering charge on top of that, which was extra $2 a month, okay. And then, of course, we have our solar standby kilowatt charge, which I have explained this in previous episodes. Basically, it means if you are a solar customer and you're connected to the grid, they charge you a standby fee based on the size of your panel array on your roof. And they basically charge you that because they're saying, well, you're not paying as much for electricity anymore, and you need to assist with supporting the grid and the maintenance that goes into supporting the grid, so you have to pay this standby fee. Now, I don't think this is right because what we're doing instead is we're supporting the grid by sending electricity back to the grid and not pulling from the grid during those demand hours because we're producing solar at the same time. Now, of course, you could say it the other way and say, now that I have a battery, I'm no longer really supporting the grid, but I'm also not pulling from the grid either. I'm actually being more self-sustainable. So whatever the case may be, this is last year's and that changes this year. So let's dive in a little bit more. So going back, customer charge of $19.50, energy charge of $22.63. They have a fuel adjustment, which I'm not sure what that is, but that's a credit every month. So this month it was $2.91. And then the demand sales adjustment, which is 42 cents. Now, those two credits have always been on our bill. I don't really know what they mean, and I don't really understand how they calculate that, but it's always been there, and I just want to be upfront with you that that is what that is. As you can see here, we have total new charges of $38.30, and then at the bottom there, you see that we had the $25.42, which is our, basically our renewable energy, credits and our fees, which means that our electricity bill for that month was $64.22. So this is April of 2024. So now that's pretty good, right? So we had a $64.22 electricity month in April of last year. This does not include our loan for solar, which you'll actually see on the next slide. And that actually is something we're paying back to the electricity company because we took a loan out with them for the solar. You'll see that on the next one, but we can disregard that fee, and I'll make sure I point that out to you. Now that we've looked at last year's, let's look at that comparatively to this year. Now, before all you keyboard warriors out there go, meh, you can't compare last year's to this year's. There's differences in solar, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yes, I understand that there are differences. We're not trying to do a one-to-one comparison here and show you that I saved an extra 32 cents from last year. I'm actually showing you exactly how the billing is different and how the billing has changed the way we are paying for electricity and how much more money we're saving because of that. So let's dive into this year's and see how that looks. All right, so here you can see we have our bill for 2025. So last month in April of 2025, you can see that we used a total of 80 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, to give you an update on our kilowatt hour rate, we are now paying about 8 cents per kilowatt hour. I think it's just a little bit more than 8 cents per kilowatt hour for our electricity rates now. So our kilowatt hour rate has gone down, but they had implemented this new demand charge. And that's where they're getting their extra money from, is this demand charge. So even though we're paying less every month for our electricity as a unit, we pay more based on that demand charge. So as you can see, we used 80 kilowatt hours of energy last month from the grid, which is quite a significant decrease than the year before. And then we actually sent back to the grid 124 kilowatt hours of energy. Now, truth be told, we were gone for a week in April. So even though we weren't here for an entire week in April, we can just add an extra, 25%. I mean, basically the energy that we sent back to the electricity company, we would have just used for ourselves. So we probably wouldn't have had that much more electricity usage from the grid, because as you can see, we sent back 124 kilowatt hours. That could very easily have gotten us through the week that we were gone, or most of the week that we were gone. So I don't really think there'd be much discrepancy there between if we were home for that week or if we were gone for a week. But if you want to add an extra 20% to the numbers, by all means, go ahead and do that. And we'll do that at the end anyway. But anyway, you could see here that we have a 0 kilowatt demand on peak. Now, so I find it ironic that on 4/7, which was April 7th, 2025, they showed that at 6 p.m., we had a demand on peak of 0 kilowatt. So what they actually do is they actually show you the minute that you actually pulled the most electricity from the grid at one time. And they actually put it on the bill, which I also think is really, really good. So this way you're not like, oh, what was that demand charge at 5:22 on, April 14th? Like, they just give it to you on the bill, and you could figure it out on your own whether or not you were doing something or you were cooking or whatever the case may be. But they show you exactly when you pulled the on-demand peak for the month, which I think is pretty cool. But you can see we got 0 kilowatts for the entire month, which means we did not have to pay the $8 times whatever kilowatt demand charge it is. And then we could see down in the right corner now, if we go down there, we could see some month numbers there that are a little different than what we were used to on our previous one. So the customer charge is now $30. So what they did here is they actually bumped up from $19.50 to $20 for all residential customers. But then they added an extra $10 if you were a solar customer. Aha. So they get you still if you're a solar customer. So they bump you up that extra $10. So this way you're paying $30 a month for being a solar customer instead of $20. Okay, I kind of get that. And then you can see we paid an energy charge of $6.34. We paid $6 in electricity last month. That is it. $6.34. Crazy. We got back $5.15 in credit because we only get about 1/3 of what we send it back. So if we send it back to them, we get about 3 cents, I think, per kilowatt hour, whereas we pay about 8 cents when we buy it from them. Kind of crappy, but whatever. It's not a big deal. Fuel adjustment is 39 cents this month, and of course the demand sales adjustment is 33 cents this month. Once again, not sure how those are calculated. I think every single month everybody gets the same amount, not really sure, but those are just some credits they give us. So our total bill for last month in electricity was $30.47. And that was because $30 of that was a customer charge. So that means we basically used a total of like $1 and change of electricity last month if you take back the credit that we got back for the electricity we sent to them, and then that fuel adjustment and demand sales charge credit. If you add those up all together, I mean, we only paid like $1 or something for electricity last month. It's crazy to see how much solar and batteries have been able to offset our demand. I mean, just to kind of give you an idea, like if we were to plug the car in during demand hours, it would be basically somewhere between like an $80 and $100 demand charge for that time. And that would well more than triple our bill by just doing some simple task that you wouldn't think about doing. You just come home from work and go click, plug your car in, and boom, you're hit with a demand charge as soon as you do that. And so it's crazy to think how we have to change our mentality of basically what we do now. I mean, it's just crazy to see that people have to now completely change that. And I've heard quite a few people already, this is actually the second month we're doing this now, and I've already heard a couple people complaining about last month's and how much they've had to spend and how much money it's costed them, like more than doubled their electricity bill just because they weren't aware or they just didn't pay enough attention to the demand charge hours that they have. So really crazy to see that our electricity bill was $30.47, and that was because of a $30 customer charge last month. And like I said, we were gone for a week, so add an extra 25% to our electricity charge. I mean, it would be a couple bucks. It'd be $3. So, I mean, that would be it. So even if you do that, even if you add that extra, we were gone for a week, we are really not paying anything for electricity right now. Now, of course, these numbers are going to completely vary based on the time of year. You know, obviously, the shorter days in the winter are not going to produce as much. Our electricity bill is going to be higher. We're going to have more demand because our heat's going to be running more during the day. And in the dead of summer, our air conditioning is going to be working as well. So these numbers will change. Our electricity will go up because of those extra demands we have. However, what we're going to do to combat the demand charge, because my goal is to basically never have a demand charge, is during the spring and summer months when our 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. peak hours is there, what we're going to do is basically just charge up the battery. We're going to charge up the battery, and then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., we're going to just run off the battery. And of course, we can do things like precondition our house. We can run the air conditioning up till 3 p.m. and then we can shut it down for a little bit, an hour or two, and then we could spin it back up again towards the end, and the battery will take the load perfectly fine. And we're going to be doing the same thing in the wintertime. We can preheat the house before the demand charge in the morning. Then we get up in the morning when it's nice and warm. The heat will be turned off at that point. We'll be off to work anyway, and so we will never see a demand charge because the battery will buffer us from the grid. So even though we've made a pretty large investment between solar and the battery, not only have we gained some independence from the grid, we also have redundancy for power outages. That is really, really nice because we've had quite a few power outages here the last couple of years. but also we have now started saving money on our electricity bill because of these demand charges. So I would say we're probably saving ourselves at least $50 to $70 a month in electricity costs alone. But then on top of that, if we weren't really cognizant of that 3-hour window every day, and we were pulling a demand during those 3 hours, we're probably saving ourselves more like $100 to $150 a month because of the extra demand charges that maybe we weren't really paying attention to. So overall, I gotta say that we are really happy with our setup here. We're really happy with the decisions we made. I'm glad that the time that we did it, when we did it, made a lot of sense. So what do you think? Do you think that having solar and battery is a smart move in the future when our electricity rates seem to continue to go up? And the other thing I want to bring up too is that our house is completely electric. We are 100% electric here. We do not have gas. We do not have oil. And our cars, we have 3 of them, are all electric as well. So we are also fueling our travel through our electricity costs every single month. So that means our commutes to work and our drives around town and all of that stuff is in this electricity bill that you saw today. So what do you think about solar and battery storage for households? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. As you can see, it's working out very well for us and we've been able to save quite a bit of money. But it's also a very big investment up front. So you got to think about that as well. But anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again for watching, everybody. And of course, we'll see you on the next episode. And remember, welcome to the future and welcome to Tech Motoring. We'll see you soon.